welcome to the Fit and Healthy Today show. And today our topic matter is COPD, an abbreviation for Chronic Obstructive Pulmonary Disease. COPD is probably easier. The definition of this is pretty much any disease that persistently obstructs the inhalation and exhalation of the airflow. It mainly involves two diseases, and that would include chronic bronchitis and emphysema. It is the fourth leading cause of death in the United States, and 12 to 24 million Americans suffer from COPD. About 12.8 people diagnosed, and they estimate another probably 50% on top of that, so making that 24 million. Just not diagnosed. You know, people are shortness of breath, they'll use inhalers, or they think they have asthma. So the diagnostics of it is, the difference between it and asthma is where asthma may be an exhalation problem. This is both, you're having a hard time inhaling and expanding the sacs, as well as decreasing the sacs as well. The causes, probably the number one cause of COPD is smoking. And when you're looking at smoking, obviously we have a higher percentage, probably more than ever now, of people smoking, in particular to younger people. Our pollution levels have risen, particularly if you're living in the city environment when you have a lot of petrochemical exposure. Dust and particulates also too, a continuation of irritants. We find oftentimes a lot of contractors who've worked around asbestos or chemical irritants of some type like paints, paint thinners, can end up with damage to their lungs causing COPD. There's also a genetic propensity towards COPD, and there's a key protein called alpha-1 antitrypsin, which is a protein that prevents lung damage. So whereas a person who is deficient in this may end up with emphysema from smoking at age 40, someone who has this adequate amount of protein may not show signs till they're 80 years old. So a genetic propensity towards this, if you have a family history of it, could also make you more likely to suffer from COPD if you smoke or you're exposed to these other potential risk factors. Now, when you have COPD, oh man, I have so many customers that have it, and they're so uncomfortable because very few medications work. Oftentimes physicians will put them on prednisone, and you know, you cannot stay on that for long periods of time without a lot of side effects. So we're going to talk about some of the supplements that can be utilized to help you with that inflammation. But first I'd like to address the diet. Okay. When we look at the diet, you need to be eating at least 50% of your foods from raw fruits and vegetables. And I know most people think, oh my God, that's impossible. But when you think about fruit, which you mostly eat raw, and you're having your salads and you're having your carrots and things like that, 50% of your diet needs to be from those alkaline producing fruits and vegetables. Because the more acidic that you eat, the more you're going to have more constriction. The blood doesn't transfer oxygen as well. So it's very important to have an alkali diet. You want to drink at least 8 glasses of water a day. You have to drink water. You cannot be dehydrated when you have COPD, or respiration will fall. That's why oftentimes humidifiers can be very helpful in the home to aid with humidification of the lungs. Avoid fried foods or foods that increase mucus, which would be like your milk products, your dairy products, eggs, red meats. Any of your processed foods are also going to increase that mucal congestion in the lungs. And obviously the thicker and the more mucus you have, the more difficult it is going to be for you to transfer oxygen and then in turn be able to breathe. You want to avoid, and I thought this was interesting, gas-forming foods. Foods that can make your belly swell or your intestines swell. Anything that can raise or rise up the digestive tract that can constrict your breathing. In addition, remember, if you are heavier in weight, it's going to make the COPD worse. So keeping a lean, mean fighting machine is always better if you suffer from this disease. When you're talking also about diet, periodic cleansings, and when people hear me say that word, they go, oh. But juice cleansings, particularly with spinach, kale, carrots, beets, those type of very alkaline or alkalizing type of juices that don't mess around too much with your sugars other than carrots, are very, very helpful. In addition, the greens, the green juices particularly, I mean, you can juice kale and you can juice spinach, and you can get a really heavy concentration of greens, which will help your oxygen transfer. Chlorophyll is very similar, the green that's found in plants is very similar to our blood cells in its ability to carry in oxygen in the blood. So greens are always important when you have any type of breathing compromise, whether it's asthma or COPD. Now, so we've got the diet. We need it to be alkali. We need it to be raw. We need to keep the red meat, inflammatory fats down. We need to do a lot of greens and avoid the processed sugary types of foods that are acidic. The diet is very, very basic on this one. Hard to follow, but basic. Supplementation, though, there's so much good supplements, so many good supplements out there that can be very helpful with this disease, and a lot of which I know I have my customers on, which we have found to be most helpful. Trying to keep prednisone or keep the prednisone levels down is always a continual battle, particularly if you have or continue to smoke or have continual irritants in the lungs. You live with a smoker. That's problematic. So when we talk about supplements, always, number one is always going to be a good multiple vitamin that has B's, has some E, has your basic minerals. You always want a good multiple vitamin, not from a warehouse, but from a good health food store. That you need are the basic nutrients for the body, for the red blood cells, for the lining of the lung membranes, bronchial, all of that. Now, when we look at studies on individual supplements that can be helpful, there are a lot of studies. I found a good study out of the University of New York, out of Rochester, and on a product called vinpocetine. Now, typically, and it's from an extract of periwinkle, which is a flower, and what vinpocetine does is it reduces inflammation by suppressing something called IKK. So it can be used long term, and it has some very similar abilities to reduce the inflammation down that prednisone has. And I know in some of the readings of some of the writings online of people's comments, they've used this to replace their prednisone. Vinpocetine we also use after someone has sustained stroke damage sometimes too, because it does help the metabolism of the brain and recovery. But definite IKK suppressing abilities, which is also too what prednisone does. We talked about greens in the diet, but there's greens and supplementation that you can do as well. And that includes all chlorophyll-rich types of greens, blue-green algae, spirulina, chlorella. They can be in pills, they can be in powders, and those are kind of your superfoods. They can alkali the blood and aid and abet the carrying of oxygen. And therefore, when you alkali, you're also going to reduce the mucus as well in the lungs. Essential fatty acids. Now, you can get this in nuts and avocados and flaxseed meal and chia seeds. But if you're not good about that, there are omega-3s and 6s that are in supplement form that can also aid, and that includes like flaxseed oil, borage oil, evening primrose oil. All these kinds of plant-based fats reduce inflammation. Now remember how I said or mentioned in the diet that when we eat a lot of meat fats, cheese fats, it produces a type of prostaglandin that raises your inflammatory response. Well, these basic types of plant source fats reduce or raise the good prostaglandins to reduce inflammation. So it's very important to keep inflammatory response down in the lungs, and the fats help. Magnesium citrate. Now this was one of the top ones mentioned, and we usually think of magnesium to aid and abet, your muscle spasms, the heart, and that. But magnesium at 200 milligrams 2 to 3 times a day, in addition to aiding the muscles that power the breathing, it really significantly aided the body's ability to oxygenate. And I didn't see a lot of explanation as to why, but definitely helped with oxygenation. So you individuals out there who are athletes, don't forget your main key electrolyte, magnesium, in addition to your potassium. CoQ10, lots of studies on that. I know I have a lung compromise. I don't have COPD, but I have lung compromise disorder that I had from a while back. But I'm on a CoQ10. Now, CoQ10 goes in on a cellular level and increases oxygenation, and that works in the heart, the lungs, the brain. It actually increases the mitochondria and the cells themselves so they operate more efficiently. But it can aid oxygenation, which actually also helps the teeth and the gums. Vitamin E, especially in a mixed tocopherol form, you always want an alpha beta gamma form, alpha beta gamma delta form. And 400 IUs, at least 400 to 1,000 IUs, actually helps with oxygen exchange, or it's actually an oxygen carrier. Ester C. Now, the studies that I'm coming across are real high dosages on this. I'm seeing 5,000, sometimes 10,000 milligrams, but I would say a minimum of 2,000 milligrams twice a day on an ester C, not taken the same time as your B vitamins always, help reduce histamine levels and reduce inflammatory response. They also help the repair of all expansive tissue, collagen-based, and that includes your lungs and your bronchial. Cordyceps. Now, I know I take Cordyceps. They can help with athletic endurance and the ability to deal with high altitude, and that's how we primarily found out about it more than anything else, is Chinese athletes were using it during one of our Olympics, and we thought they were cheating, the marathon runners. But what we discovered was the Cordyceps, especially the CS4 strain, actually aided in oxygen transfer and the body's ability to carry oxygen. I could tell you stories about that where I have some of my clients, my customers, that have gone to the very high mountains in South America, and they'll take this with them because it really aids their breathing when they're at 13,000, 14,000 feet. And literally, they've had guides ask them to leave that behind. So Cordyceps really can aid and abet. DMG, dimethyl glycine, increases endurance and actually aids the cells in getting oxygen. 250 milligrams 3 times a day on this particular supplement. Pycnogenol, very heavy antioxidant for the lungs, but also aids in oxygenation, at least 50 milligrams twice a day. Now, I very rarely mention specific products, but in this particular case, there were a couple sources that mentioned this product, and it's a Chinese medicine formula called Clear Lungs, and it's manufactured by a company by the name of Ridgecrest. And it really aided and abetted the body's ability to get rid of mucus and the breathing capacity. Very, 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 very helpful. All these supplements have studies, documentation, and I can tell you from the years that I've been in business, they're well utilized, and I use them myself for my oxygen transfer in my lungs. Now, there are some other suggestions that I would like to add to conclude my discussion. You've got to clean the dust out of your house. The more dusty of a house or environment you have, those are particulates. You've got to keep the dust down. So you've got to dust, sweep, and vacuum. But believe it or not, you're not the one that should be doing it. Because if you raise the dust and that type of thing, it actually can contribute to the COPD. So get a house cleaner or someone else to clean your house, especially when you are there. You actually don't want to be while they're cleaning the house. Castor oil packs. And you can literally take warm towels with castor oil, put it on the bronchial in the lungs, and that can aid and abet a real heaviness of breathing. It's been done for a long, long time. Edgar Cayce, a well-known kind of a spiritualist healer, came up with this, and it actually does work. And it's just castor bean oil. Castor bean oil also helps with arthritic types of pain as well, too. Now, there are also some yoga breathing exercises that can help with COPD, and you can go on YouTube and look those up. One is an alternative nostril breathing exercise. The other one is a breath that you inhale and you count 15 seconds up, and then you gradually decline and decrease the abdominal in the breath for another 15 seconds. So you work yourself up to doing that breathing where you take your time in breath. So it aids in a breath control. There's also a breath called the fire breath, which can also clear out the lungs. And we'll be doing that in the fitness portion of our show. I'll demonstrate that to you. Avoid all chemicals in your cleaning and your soaps and your laundry detergents and all those things. You got to get rid of those chemical irritants. I know we don't think about it when we're pouring the grocery store laundry detergent. So get your cleaning supplies from a health food store. Make sure they're clean as far as no chemical components. They need to be natural. And then, as I mentioned before, humidify your home. Keep it moist, but you've got to keep those humidifiers clean. Be sure to clean them out. No moldy types of stuff going on. Next, we're going to be moving on to the breathing exercises for the fitness portion of our show. Thank you. Hi, welcome to the fitness portion of the show. And today I'm going to show you a fire breath and then a short panting breath to aid and abet your breathing. Now, this can be used for COPD, but it can also be used for asthma when you're having a difficult time, or anytime you're having a difficult time breathing. And fire breath is a very strong breath that we use in yoga. I'm a yoga instructor, and this is what we utilize to clear out our lungs and our respiratory. So it basically entails just inhaling through your nostrils abruptly and then exhaling through the nostrils again. So you lift up and so you're forcibly pulling it in and pulling it out. And what you'll probably notice is maybe somewhere in between there. If I would do it enough times, number one, you got your nose, but number two, it forces the lungs to push the mucus out. Second one I want to show you is just a basic nostril panting breath. And all it is, basically, is you're just panting through your nostrils. And it goes like this. And like that, I usually end up with a cough. What that does is after we do the fire breath, we push it up through the bronchial, and then we do a bit of a panting breath to try and push it out the rest of the way. I think if you try these exercises, they'll help you breathe easier and deeper. Next, we're going to be moving on to the research portion of our show. Thank you. Hi, welcome to the research portion of our show, and with us today is Ralph Turchiano.
And thank you for that intro. For today, we're going to cover 4 subjects. 1, olive oil and feeling full. 2, something bitter about asthma. 3, something bitter about pancreatic cancer. And number 4, vitamin E can prevent cancer, but what type? All right, let's just start off with this. Olive oil makes you feel full, but not in a way that you actually think. It doesn't have to do with actually eating olive oil itself. Well, what happened? This was printed in Research News last week, and what they discovered was this, and it'll be March 14th, just in case you're watching later on. They noticed a lot of foods started going low fat. Well, when low fat came out, people started consuming more, defeated the purpose altogether. So they wanted to see what happened when they added fats back into food. Well, they added lard, butterfat, rapeseed oil, and olive oil. But one of those 4 oils, even though rapeseed oil and olive oil are fairly similar, only one of those 4 oils actually suppressed the appetite by about 176 less calories per day. This was a double-blind placebo study where basically the consumer did not realize which one they were eating. Well, they discovered it was olive oil. Why? Because the chemical or 2 chemicals in olive oil called hexanol and E2-hexanol. Now guess what? It doesn't make a difference whether you consume these chemicals or not, because they actually took the hexanol and eoxanol and added to other sorts of fats and had the same results. It is the aroma of olive oil which suppresses the appetite. It says, which blows them away. The aroma compounds in olive oil. In the second part of the study, one group was given yogurt with olive oil aroma extracts, and the control group was given plain yogurt. They said the aroma group adapted their eating habits, but the control group, participants who are obviously not able to do likewise, meaning the control group being the people without olive oil. We also found the comparison to the other group, the control group had less of the satiating hormone serotonin in blood. So, after this, they discovered it was the two compounds, hexanol and E2-hexanol. And keep in mind, not all of olive oils are the same. They looked at olive oils from Spain, Greece, Italy, and Australia. It was only the Italian olive oil which had the highest levels of these two compounds. So keep that in mind. Our findings show that aroma is capable of regulating satiety. Can't pronounce that right now. We hope this work paved the way to developing the more effective reduced fat food products that are none less satiating, meaning adding these two chemicals. I'm just wondering, add a little olive oil to your shampoo and you're set the rest of the day with a suppressed appetite. Keep in mind, though, it's got to probably be unprocessed or a virgin, extra virgin olive oil. You don't want to destroy those compounds through heat. After that, bitterness in asthma. They found out there's a new mechanism for relaxing the airways using bitter-tasting substances. Remember, I'm using the word bitter, not spicy. Now, how in the world can something you taste relax the airways? Well, let's get to this. And this was printed in the March 5th Journal of the Public Library of Science of Biology. They said, quote, substances which give some foods their bitter flavors can also act to reverse the contraction of airway cells. The reversal known as bronchial dilation. And it says to treat airway obstructive diseases such as asthma and what we just covered, COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. They said before they never knew how bitterness did this, but they discovered it. During an asthma attack, membrane channels on smooth muscles cells in the airways are opened, allowing calcium to flow into the cell, causing the cells to contract, or the bronchial tube to constrict. Think of it that way. What the bitter compounds did, ironically through the saliva, through something called G-beta gamma dimer, and I don't want to get too much technical jargon in regards to that, but just the taste caused this to happen, was basically, it said this, it allowed the bitter substances to shut down the calcium channels, allowing the bronchial dilation. So, during the asthma attack, channels opened, calcium came in, you had constriction. The bitterness sent the signals to the body to stop the calcium from entering the cells, allowing the bronchial tubes to relax. Henceforth, asthma attack stopped. In their words, with this new understanding of how bitter substances are able to relax airways, we can focus our attention on studying these receptors and finding even more potent bitter compounds with the potential to be used therapeutically to end asthma attacks. Now, using epinephrine or ephedrine, we're not using steroids, we're not using anything along those lines. We're just using bitter tasting foods. Now, that's something you may want to talk to your doctor or somehow, if you like, experiment with yourself, if provided you're not lethally prone to asthma attacks. Bitterness, not spicy, but bitter. So, simple, safe, no side effects. Now to another bitter substance, bitter melon and pancreatic cancer. What they know for a long period of time is that bitter melon is great for helping treat type 2 diabetes. It's been used for generations among many cultures, especially Asian cultures in India and China. Well, this was published in the Journal of Carcinogenesis. This is March 12th. What they found out, and this is their quote, is that bitter melon restricts the energy and eventually kills the cancer cells while leaving the normal cells untouched, unlike chemotherapy. 3 years ago, the research showed in vitro, that means not in the body, that's usually in a test tube, that bitter melon killed breast cancer cells. And they also noticed at the same time, too, bitter melon helped with diabetes. So they wanted to cut out the middleman and just see what it did with pancreatic cancer cells. And they discovered, shown the effect that type 2 diabetes and has been used to centuries to treat diabetes in folk medicine, Following this line of thinking, the colleagues wondered what would happen if they closed out the middleman of diabetes and directly explored the link between melon and pancreatic cancer. They showed in mouse models, not human models yet, that pancreatic cancers, or prone pancreatic cancer mice that were fed bitter melon juice were 60% less likely to develop the disease than the controls. Again, just bitter melon juice. And this work was supported by a grant to the National Institute of Health. And lastly, but not least for today, vitamin E can help prevent cancer. Another study supported by the grants from the National Institute of Health. And what they discovered, and also published in the Science of Signaling, that vitamin E inhibits the activation of certain enzymes which are essential for cancer cell survival. Now, keep in mind there's a caveat to this. They said synthetic vitamin E does not do it. Quote, the most affordable, or I should say cheapest supplements you find in supermarkets and warehouses use synthetic. It's a DL-alpha tocopherol, DL-alpha tocopherol. And it's based predominantly on a form of the vitamin that did not fight cancer as effectively in the study. What they used, and this was also done at Ohio State University, and they're trying to file a patent on it. Yes, even though it was done with taxpayer dollars, you can do that, which kind of really sucks. That's a whole other subject, though. Is that the gamma form of the vitamin E was particularly effective in deactivating the enzymes responsible for basically propagating cancer. The loss of the enzyme called what they called AKT led to tumor cell death. And also, unlike chemotherapy, the gamma tocopherol that they used had no negative effect on normal cells. So, just as a general rule, when buying a vitamin E, if you don't get a gamma tocopherol straight, use at least a mixed tocopherol. And in the mixed tocopherol, you see alpha, beta, delta, gamma. Now, keep in mind, they also claim the amount of gamma tocopherol required is going to be much higher than you're going to find in your normal doses. So, the way they restructured the gamma tocopherol is a restructure in a way to is 20 times more effective than the amount of gamma tocopherol usually found in your typical vitamin E supplement. Even though I'd much like to know how much vitamin E they utilized, again, they're using a patent, they're not going to be revealing a lot, and yeah, even though the patent was paid for with taxpayer, or the research with taxpayer dollars, we'll see. Well, that's the end of the subject, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ralph. Once again, thank you for joining our show. Do your research, be healthy. Thank you.